UMO Design presents.
I visited countries for long enough to learn language to say something meaningful in it.
Definitely comes right out of Wikipedia.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the fourth weekend of the Women in Design Fest. I'm Bhuvana, your host, and I'm so delighted to have so many of you join us from so many parts of the world today. We have a wonderful lineup of women speakers here for you today. We hope you've been enjoying our sessions so far, and we hope you enjoy today's session too. We've had three insightful sets of sessions so far, and we have many more in store for you today, as well as in the coming weeks. So we hope you enjoy them all. The Women in Design Fest is presented to you by the UMO Design Foundation, a nonprofit that has been creating design awareness for over a decade through events, conferences, and design education. UMO is the force behind initiatives like the UX India Conference, the Women in Design Fest, the UMO Design School, UX in Collaborative, and Design Social. At UMO, our mission is to inspire and educate 1 million women to become designers by the year 2030. To take this forward, we aim to provide scholarships worth 150,000 US dollars to provide design education to women aspirants through the UMO Design School and make them employable in 2022. At the UMO Design School, we aspire to sponsor design education for students who possess the right aptitude but lack the financial ability. The courses are industry recognized and are taught by some of the finest mentors and academic partners. We welcome you to be a part of the UMO Design family by supporting us as a partner, a mentor, or a volunteer. This is our 15th year organizing the Women in Design Fest. Last year, we had 7 online sessions spread out over 7 weekends. You can rewatch these on the UMO Design School dashboard. If you, just like last year, the Women in Design Fest is spread over 7 weekends this year too. If you missed out on watching the previous sessions, you can go back to your UMO design account and find them on the dashboard. Today is our fourth segment, and we have a versatile lineup of speakers here to join us today. So we hope you all enjoy it. We have our speakers, Riddhi, Roberta, Julia, Garima, and Supriya, speaking with us today. After each talk, we will give you, our audience, an opportunity to ask questions to each of our speakers. We will also have a conversation about the future of design, which will be moderated by Kanika Kohli. So stay tuned. Before we begin, I'd like to mention that you can post your questions for each of our speakers in the comment section during the talk. So we can pick up uh, right after the talk. We can pick your questions right after the talk. So now it's time to listen to our first speaker. Joining us live is Riddhi Mehta. Riddhi is a product design manager with Media.net in Bengaluru and has extensive experience leading product design and CRO initiatives. I welcome Riddhi to begin today's session. Over to you, Riddhi.
Hi, Bhuwana. Thank you so much for having me here. It's been a pleasure associating with Humor Design. My today's talk is going to be about design and data. So I guess we can begin right off. I'll just share my screen. Hi. So, the whole talk that I've planned around is data and design as to how we can merge these two and sort of demystify this whole process as to how data driven design can be run in organizations. But first, let us understand a few aspects as to how we arrive onto a design. Like Steve Jobs said, that design is not just what it looks like, it is how it works. And how does design work? Let's look at one example. So they say that user experience and design can be two different parts as a part of a product. The user experience could be completely different, and the design that was meant to be could be different. So, how do you find this path? Well, in reality, while we are designing ideal routes in design, what Ohio State University did was they allowed their students to just go through the lawn. The students walked paths, they wore out those paths, and then there were those desired paths that were created on the grass. And seeing how these the people were behaving, these paths were then paved for the Ohio State University. So this is how we could come up to design, but then this is an offline way of doing things. How about doing things online? How will we define paths for our users online in an application, on a website, or in any other product for that matter? Well, the answer to this is red routes. Now, just a brief understanding of red routes before we go into the technical aspect. These red routes are routes that were created in London in around 1990s. These were major roads wherein traffic was not allowed to stop. All the vehicles that would go over would get a free flow. Any volume of vehicles could go through these paths. And the main goal was just to let them flow freely without obstruction. But how does this relate to design? Well, when you think of it, when we apply it to design, these red routes become the critical, frequent paths that take users to complete their task. So, in design, these red routes are the routes that your users are going to take in order to complete the main action that they would have come onto your product for. So, those become our red routes. Now, let us understand a little bit further than this as to what actually red routes are and how do we define them or identify them. Well, in terms of identification, these routes will be the most crucial and critical routes on your product. They are going to be the ones that deliver value. We cannot call a single action as a red route. Say signing up is a single action, but the whole sign up registration process from beginning to end, that would become a red route for say a lead gen domain product. These are routes that are most frequently utilized by the users that come onto the product. Then going further, these become our key value drivers. So they are the ones that drive your business metrics. Say you are a lead gen, your business metric is your leads that are being collected. So the whole registration process becomes a red route. You can define success very objectively for the red routes. So this helps us identify them more easily. And like I said, they are always tied to the most critical product metrics. Going a little bit further as to when we actually start mapping a red root metrics, what does it look like? How do you correlate it with, say, another app today? Let's look at two examples. One is Uber. For Uber, when the rider has to select or request a ride, that becomes the red route for a rider. The normal route would be say adding a payment method, checking how much money do they have in their wallet. So these are different actions that the user is going to take on Uber, but then the main red route is requesting a ride. For Airbnb, if we see the same thing, a guest booking a room becomes the red route. Any normal route would be, say, checking reviews, leaving a review, looking at pictures. These become our normal routes. So, how do you map them? What we can do is we can have the features that are the frequency of the features on one side of the matrix and the number of users on the other side of the matrix. When we map it together, say how many users are using which feature with how much frequency, we will know that in a product that has multiple features, which become our red route or when we are mapping it. But then, say I have a sign up button on my website, how would I know that, how many people are using it? What is the frequency? When are they using it? Things like that. Lots of questions. So, how do I actually identify these red routes? Well, one answer to this is you use data. Now, data means a lot of things. What does data mean? What kind of data are we referring to when it comes to products? It has a subset of a variety of things. Some of those are heuristic analysis. Visually, we look at things, we make observations about how things look, we conduct user research, we conduct surveys, we look at competitors, what everybody else is doing in the market. There are various studies, white papers, case studies published. All these will give you some amount of data, some kind of data. And then on one side, we have real customer data, which is your web and app analytics and your A B testing results. Now, how would you come across these data points? Like, what are the kind of questions that you can ask? Simply starting from, say, any product that you own would most likely is going to have a search functionality. Now, if you go into your product search engine and see what are users looking for when they come onto my product, that is just one point of getting started and understanding your real customer base, your real users. So that is what we are going to talk about. Now, when we combine customer data with design, it gives us data driven design. Data driven design is something that a lot of users would probably find intimidating sometimes, but that's because we don't know the depth of it. We don't know, we're not very familiar with data. I come from two design schools. I've done industrial design as my bachelor's. In masters, I've done communication design, but nowhere were we taught data per se. So we're not very familiar with it. So the moment something foreign comes into our day-to-day work, we get intimidated, which even I was a couple of years back. Sometimes I didn't even find it necessary as to why should I look into data. This just does not look right. Let us change it. Let us make it look beautiful. But then once I started understanding the process of creating data-driven designs, the success that you achieve after you drive a data-driven design, then the whole process gets demystified. So what I'm trying to do over here today is trying to make this whole process more accessible to designers at all levels of experience. But before we go into more of this, I'll just try and make this whole process of understanding data driven design easier. When we talk about marketing, there are two types of marketing that we know, right? One is brand marketing, which means that we tell the user as to how what a company's reputation is, what are the values. We try and build customer loyalty. We show the variety of products. We show the quality of the products. We try and create that credibility. Now, through that, we are hoping that the customer or the consumer gets motivated and they make the purchase. So that is one type of marketing. Then we come down to performance marketing. What is performance marketing? All of us these days know that when brands want to target conversions, they go up to performance marketing. We focus on performance, we execute only desired results, we go in the direction of those results. So why can't we think of design in the same way? This leads me to coin a term called performance design. When you think of performance design, what comes to our minds? Something that is performing, something which goes slightly a level above design. For a designer, mainly there are two assets that we have our intuition and we have our experience. Those are the two biggest assets that we have, that when we look at things we know that these are not aligned. This color palette is not working. This is an old trend, I should revise it, because that is our asset. Now, if we take those two assets, fuse it with data, we come up with performance design, something which we can derive more value out of when it goes into the market. So let's understand this a little bit further. So, intuition design is mainly based on our perception, what we've been taught, what we've seen around us, our imagination. It's very subjective. Whereas performance design, every decision that I want to take for changing anything on my product is purely derived from data. And where is this data derived from? That data is derived from observing different user behaviors, whether I'm looking at heat maps, user recordings, or I have an actual database of a lot of users, or any other digitally collected evidence that I'm looking at. Say I'm using Google Analytics, Clever Tap. There are many resources these days that collect, analyze data, and sometimes even give good insights to you. Taking these insights and designing basis those will give me performance design. At this stage, I'll also want to tell you that 5 6 years back, when I joined a previous firm that I was used to work with, I was already in the field for 5 years, and I was nicely designing products in the medical industry, in the sports industry, b2c, b2b, those phases. And then suddenly I was in this interview, and the CEO was on the opposite side, and he asked me, "Do you know what a CTA is?" And I was like, I don't know what's a CTA. Is like, what are A/B tests? What is a UX audit? I said I have no idea about it. All I know is that I can learn, and I do have my focus on the technical aspects of design as well. So, other than using just the color palette and the creativity of our minds, if we start using data along with that intuition, that will take us to performance design. Intuition design is usually led by a designer. When they come up with their own creativity, they give out a very creative solution, and we have a design ready. Performance design is difficult to carry it out alone. It is a team effort. It's a collaborative effort wherein a designer is going to be working alongside a developer, understand things that have worked in the past, what has not worked in the past. We'll work with content writers, UX content writers. We'll work with digital analysts, data analysts who are going to help us with the data and the insights that they've seen and collected. And we're also going to combine marketing specialists into it. So this becomes a collaborative effort wherein everybody researches, brings out insights, and then at the very end, these insights are fused into the design, and the design is carried out and given to an audience. And at the last stage, like if you were to understand certain common traits of intuition design is usually going to be very aesthetic, because that's what we focus on. We want people to get wowed when they look at it for the first time. So most of the times UI is on the center stage. UX might take slightly backstage when it comes to intuition design. But at the same time, when a user comes, gets wowed by my design, I would want them to have a fabulous experience so that they come again. They tell 10 other people about my product. Customer retention is something which becomes of utmost importance right now, because earlier there were a lot of players in the industry who were, who were having monopoly over the market. Say just one kind of an app for gymming, one kind of an app for content. Now there are 10 kinds of apps for everything, 100 kinds of apps for everything. If I am not able to retain my customers, I will not be able to grow the way I want. So when it comes to performance design, my experience takes center stage. The experience that I'm giving to the user, the hooks that I'm creating for the user will take a center stage. But sometimes performance design may not be as effective or as pretty as intuition driven design. So, this is something that we keep in our minds when we design for performance. Now, how about looking at the benefits of performance design? Like I've already said, there are certain things that performance design is going to help you with. Understand your users and their needs. Now, having a general idea, say I'm designing an app for boys and I make the app blue, is a data informed design. But when I actually look at the app, I see what percentage of users are male, what percentage are female, and accordingly see the ages and design. That becomes a data driven performance design. This will help you move past best practices. This will help us create more effective designs that are going to impact our business positively. And at the end, we are going to use data to drive innovation. So, this is how we can look at performance design. Now, one interesting aspect about this is uh, before you get into design, you need to be a doctor. What does that mean? What does that mean? That be a doctor before you design. What does a doctor do? When we go to them, when we tell them that this is this and this is so and so is happening, the doctor is going to ask you more questions. They're going to ask you, when is it happening, why is it happening, when was the last time it happened, for how long, everything. And then in the very end, after they've actually understood your problem, they will give you a prescription. For designers, since we are very fast visually and are able to imagine things a lot more quickly, when somebody shows us a design and tells us that this is a design that we want to redesign, we'll quickly start thinking that, oh, the placement seems wrong, or the color is not right, or the fonts, maybe they could have been a little bit bigger, or let's change the typography a little bit. But then once you understand that these are 10 things that are happening, and this is one important thing that I need to solve for, maybe you won't need so many changes, maybe you will just need one change, and that design is going to be a high performing design. So, what are the questions that we can ask? If I were to be a doctor, what would I ask in terms of a design question? We need to ask questions that help us take these design decisions. Say, I have created a heuristic assumption that this particular button, since it is placed, say, near to the fold, it might be getting missed by the users. That's a heuristic assumption that I'm making. The question that I can ask is, can you help me tell the number of clicks that this button receives versus the number of visitors that come onto my page? That means how many users are clicking on this button. So that becomes a validation of any heuristic assumption that I'm creating. At the same time, we can ask different questions, say which of the pages have higher bounce rate, which of the pages have lower bounce rate, which pages are performing, where the maximum conversions are happening, where do the users leave, when do they re-enter. So many questions when you think of it. Endless amount of questions, and all these questions are going to have answers. So if you want to look at a few examples as to how the perception can get changed when you start taking these things into consideration, one good example that I can give over here is Notion. Notion at this point is become pretty, favorite a favorite tool amongst a lot of domains of people. Like a lot of industries now use Notion, designers, developers, managers, everybody. But if you were to know Notion's story, Notion was launched somewhere around 2015. But then when it was launched, it almost died. It almost died because the creators of the product wanted to create something very cool. They wanted to create, say, like a file cabinet wherein we can place all our files. But then those kind of tools exist. So when they started understanding what their audience wanted, what their audience needed, they slowly started iterating out on the whole product. And the Notion that we know today is a very collaborative tool. The whole USP of the product is different, that it is one workspace, every team, which means all kinds of domains are being catered to, all kinds of services are being given to the users. People can come collaborate, somebody can create a blog, somebody can create a website, portfolio, resume, endless opportunities. So this happened after they understood that what were the users actually looking for. One more example, if I were to show you a design and take a design critique on this, a lot of us would say that oh, this design is, say, too loud, does not look very clean finished, it looks a little rudimentary. But if I were to tell you that this design is made in a way so that it helps elderly people, once I know that I'm catering to, say, a 60 plus crowd, I will have to design according to them. We will not go just basis the design trends or the knowledge that we have, we will design for the audience that is going to actually use this app. So, coming to sort of like a conclusion for this, collecting and analyzing data becomes very important and key to creating a better design and a better user experience. And this is a skill that, a lot of us at the beginner as well as an expert design stage could really utilize. Because when we sit down to design, when I say I sit down to design, I'm creating a new product, I don't really have a lot of data. When you redesign, you have an old product, you have lots of data available. But what about when you design a new product? What do? We have a lot of research, we have other things, other competitors that we can look at, but then there are numerous dilemmas. What font size is the best? What call to action can be used? How do you take decisions on all these? Because the multitude of options that we have to choose from sometimes actually give us a headache, because these days there are so many best practices, a lot of things that happen. In a case like this, I would say for a designer, one of the best practices or a good start would be to trust your gut. Start from something that impacts your business positively, and then go into A/B testing, validate those and improvise upon those results. Let's go into one small example for this. Say I have a round design. Via intuition, I know that a round button is going to look good over here, but something about research tells me that a square button could also work better. So what I would do is, say, launch the round button, calculate and collect some amount of data, then launch my square button and A/B test these two, and then see that, oh, the square button is actually giving me better conversions. Because we as humans tend to now generate a lot of data with the new technology, with the new products that come into our day-to-day lives. We cannot miss out on analyzing the data that we ourselves generate, because they have the most important and insightful insights, and they help us take better decisions for our business. um, Going further into A/B testing, the human mind works in various ways. There are various user groups that are going to respond to the circle button, the square button, everything separately. So we need to A/B test. We could have a multivariate test, we could have behavior flows, and understand all these things better. But this is a lot of theory. When it comes down to, say, you have a product, you want to test out things, what can you test out? I'll just give you a few examples as to what you can test out. We can test out the size of a button, we can test where the placement is, what is the text on the button, the color of the button, so many things. For just one single button, there could be numerous A/B tests. We can test out the headline. Say I have a form or a pop-up, I can test out the headline, what value. Say I have 5 value propositions, I can test out each value proposition and see that if I place value proposition A, the subscribe button gets hit 50 times. If I place value proposition B, the subscribe button gets pressed 120 times. Accordingly, I would know that which heading or which value proposition works the best for my business. We can have pictures and illustrations that we can A/B test. Different pictures strike different emotions in different people, and whatever suits our audience the best, that is something that we can go ahead with. Even the smallest thing, such as your placeholder text, can be A/B tested. These could tell us that placing that what placeholder text is going to give me a more better click through rate on my subscribe button. And all this, trying to sum this all up, I have one approach that I take when I sit down and design these days, which I would like to call as the strike model, wherein the first thing that we could do is study. We study and discover the product features, we study the data that we have at hand, then we test live variants of the design that we've created. We then reveal different patterns, trends, likings as to what these tests have to give out in terms of results. From these results, I would improvise. Say I changed the copy a little bit, it made a difference, but it did not make a large difference. So I'm going to improvise and iterate upon them and come onto a new design. Then I'm going to see, are my KPIs being met? Once I analyze the impact on my KPIs, I will know whether or not I can execute this design. So when it comes to achieving KPIs, there's a loop that if I've achieved my KPIs, yes, I can execute my results. If I have not achieved my KPIs, that means I still need to study some bit further and go through the process again till I achieve my KPIs. So the process becomes very simple. We measure first and then we fix. There are a lot of things that we can fix, but there is a lot of data to understand why something exists the way it is. Once we've understood that, then we move on to the fixing stage. To conclude my talk, I'd just leave one thought with you guys, which would be that imagine a day when we walk into a room and a coffee machine starts brewing coffee for you. The lights get dim, our favorite music starts playing. Everything that we want is going through our way. Now that is prediction. We are using prediction these days to build a machine learning algorithm that can predict outcomes, predict user data. But imagine feeding that predictive analytics algorithm to UX design. And then when we develop designs, how the designs would, envision themselves in the future. So that is something that we can definitely look forward to. With this, I would like to end my talk. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much, Riddhi, for that amazing talk. So, we now have some questions from the audience, which I'm going to read out. Uh, so, one of our audience members asks, which is the best approach to practice, data centric or data driven? Why?
I'll just, you know, twist this a little bit. Rather than calling it data centric, let's call it data informed. Say, like I said, that when I create an app for boys, I would like a blue color scheme rather than a pink color scheme, because via data, via options, via knowledge, I know that blue works better for boys. So I'm informed. Data is informing me. Whereas when I have two versions out of my app, a blue and a black, and I'm catering to a male audience and I'm seeing what they're performing better on, say the black appeals to them better, that will become my data driven design. That will become my data driven approach. So I would say we cannot exactly choose between these two. It depends on what UX maturity we are at in terms of the product, and accordingly we can choose the approach.
Great. Thank you so much. And the next question is, how do you measure intuition design over performance design?
Right. Um, Intuition design is something that can be measured through simple metrics. Say session duration. I've created a design which is based purely on my way of designing, thinking, best practices, everything. So I would just go and look at, oh, how much time are the users spending? Are the users exiting this page? Are they actually spending time? How many pages are they visiting when they come onto my site? What is the frequency which they are coming on? So this is just like top metrics that we're looking at. But then when it comes to performance design, I'm going to go into each and everything. Say the users are on the home page, they're spending 20 seconds on my home page. How many folds are they looking at? Are they actually going towards the bottom of the design? When they went on the third page, what did they actually see? What did they click on? And why did they exit? When I try understanding all those smaller aspects, then I'll be measuring performance design. Otherwise, intuition design would be like from the top.
That's great to know. Thank you so much, Riddhi. That was an
Thank you.
amazing talk.
Thank you so much.
Our second speaker today is Roberta Tassi. Roberta is joining us live from Milan, and she's the founder and design director of Oblo, a hyper specialized service design studio supporting people and organizations along their innovative journeys. Roberta also teaches at various universities in Milan. Over to you, Roberta.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction and for having me today. And what I would like to do is to take this as an opportunity to share some reflection on our role as designers dealing with innovation and helping companies in their, let's say, innovation journeys. And what I'm going to share is inspired by the work I do at Oblo and basically projects that we've been doing with big corporates, small agencies, but also at very different scales from private to public sector. And so typically we present ourselves as service designers. But in general, I think when I think of designers in the current days and how they are perceived inside the organization, and also when we introduce ourselves to approach new projects, I was asking myself, what are we recognized for? What really like stands out in our role and in the approach that we bring. And something that keeps coming to my mind is the fact that typically we are the ones with a big heart, in the sense that we often find ourselves in a context in which there are a lot of, let's say, variables affecting the decisions that company make on products and the services they have on the market. It could be related to obviously business reasons. It could be related to the technology and the opportunities that technology is opening up. But there is also another element that is the human side of all of these. And so how much the products and the experiences that we make are able to address user needs that we already know, that we discover in the field, and basically in that way become successful. So typically in this design-driven innovation, we are the ones who basically try to advocate for the user and people needs in general, and try to basically balance decisions taken in that direction. So we can say that something that we find ourselves doing a lot is fighting for the user in that context. And I would like to have maybe a closer look at what it means when we are dealing with this within strategic business decisions and let's say tech-driven innovation. So talking about companies and businesses a bit more, we have seen in the recent years a lot more designers joining these companies, and a lot more of, let's say, importance in the role that these designers have in shaping the products and the experiences that organizations deliver. And this phenomenon is very much associated with what is called digital transformation, because actually the fact for many companies to the need for many companies to integrate a digital touch point, let's say, in the service and the products that they offer, has basically revolutionized the way in which they operate as companies themselves. And in order to better understand and fix the processes and better integrate that digital layer into their offer, they've been relying a lot on designers, not just UX designers, but designers also able to map out complex processes and help them reorganize things internally. So we saw many approaches to this integration of design skills into the organization, starting from enriching the skill sets of people working already in the different departments to creating innovation lab or design lab that everybody could use in order to, let's say, innovate the way in which they offer specific services within the company. And in other cases, we saw basically new companies coming out, rebuilding their departments and structure in different ways. So this is very nice, and I think a lot of people say that this has brought the designers from being just maybe one part of the execution of an idea, designing your interface or other features. This has brought the designer to the table of decision makers because the contribution that we can give by analyzing exactly like what needs to be done to deliver a specific user experience properly has a lot to do with also the decisions related to what the company is doing and how it's positioned in the market and how it's organized internally. So this is very nice, but it's also quite difficult. So you see in this picture, we were helping a company working in the manufacturing field, trying to understand how to expand the market with a new service offer, with a new software. And we were right there exchanging thoughts with the CEO and other people in the company. You see the CEO is there. At some point, this guy made an observation and he said, we have a problem here because we are asking these designers who don't know anything almost about the business of leather manufacturing and all the business they were involved to help us with this big decision that we need to make on the software that we are developing. And honestly, I have to say, yeah, partially it was true because we are not expert of that specific industry. But what we can bring on the table is our methodology, our tools, the way in which we synthesize a lot of data with the mapping of the processes and the experiences. And all of those could actually help in trying to understand a bit better the workflow, for example, of the people involved in the use potentially of that software and the positioning of it, and in general help make decisions. But the dialogue is not always easy because we have our own language in a way that we try to adapt to the ones of the organizations we work with, but we don't necessarily 100% understand each other. So looking at the future and looking at how designers have been playing more and more critical roles in the decision making related to the products they work on, I think it's important to, in some cases, think of the designer a bit more as somebody who is actually working closely with the organization and helping organizations better understand what to do, thanks to expanding their knowledge beyond pure design knowledge, to embrace a bit of knowledge around obviously data, connecting to the previous talk, and how to integrate data better in the decisions we propose to make, but also business management tools and managerial tools to analyze processes and improve them. And I think this type of designers work more and more closely with the organizations, need to also develop this capability of becoming translators internally of the needs of different departments, people with different backgrounds, facilitate processes, and slowly now contribute to a change in the organization itself, the way in which they think of the products and the experiences they offer. I think this type of designer needs to also be very patient because change takes a lot of time and energy, especially because it has to deal with the internal culture of organizations. Yeah, and maybe it will become industry specific because the language of each industry is also very different. This is one part of it, of how we then advocate for user needs in contexts that are very strategic. On the other side, there is a lot to do of what we are doing has a lot to do also with the advancement related to the introduction of new technology and the possibilities opened up by new technologies. And in general, looking at what we have now and looking ahead, there are a lot of emerging technologies that could really revolutionize the way in which we approach services and the type of services and products we use. Thinking in particular of artificial intelligence, or connected objects in general, and all the, let's say, upcoming innovation related to gene editing and all those things. So we are going in a direction in which this type of interventions, thinking, for example, of artificial intelligence is applied to products and services we use, could in a certain way really augment our capabilities, but also influence the development of our capabilities. So there is a lot to think about in terms of the consequences that some of these technologies could bring to human life as individuals and as a collective society. Here it's an example of a project in which we are working closely with tech strategists of, in this case, the company was Samsung, and we were discussing together how in like 10 years from now, so in quite a long-term vision, we could approach communication in a different way thanks to the upcoming tech improvements and new technologies we could rely on. And here our role is really like to try to help these companies to really like imagine the futures that we want to create. So after a lot of months talking and studying, doing research with experts, with users, with extreme users, we generated tons of ideas on how communication could be revolutionized. And I remember that one of these ideas that we were looking at was this represented very quickly by the team we were working with, was this idea that we could have sort of little holograms coming up on the phone that were kind of replacing the video call with another type of interaction that was more based on this, let's say, this representation of the person you were speaking with on top of, for example, of your screen of the phone. And when we were looking at this, we were thinking really like, but is this the type of use that we want to make of technology? How is this adding to what we can do now? And what is the meaning of it in our life? So in this, let's say, more like tech-driven innovation, our role is to really help the people we work with, being in this case engineers or people with the different roles, see what type of experiences we are contributing to, what we are actually building in the future ahead of us. And we have our capability to envision things and make ideas more tangible, to prototypes, to scenarios and stories. And this is all very helpful to try to really touch in a way the experience that we are imagining and depicting, and also think a bit of the consequences that they could bring in the long term. So when it comes to the emerging technology, I think the designers who deal with these type of challenges in terms of projects really need to be able to look more at human behavior and try to learn and expand in this sense the design skills we have, learning more about behavioral science, cognitive science, in order to really like try to understand what are the evolutions of the human behavior, what are the consequences that we could generate by introducing new type of experiences and interactions, and narrate it to the rest of the team so that everybody could be aware. And in this case, the storytelling capability becomes super important because we are projecting ourselves in the future. We are trying to depict new scenarios and then backcast till where we are today and try to see what we need to do in order to facilitate the creation of either one future or the other. So coming towards a bit of the conclusion, I just wanted to highlight this because I think as designers, we have been studying and learning many different things related to, for example, UX, interaction design, and our entering, let's say, the big organizations has a lot to do with that. But then the role that we are ending up playing could take different twists, as we saw, and require a bit of a stretch of our competencies that could evolve more in a direction of better understanding organizations or better understanding human behaviors. And this is very important in today's time because the innovation introduced with technologies is all around us, and we already perceive the consequences of some of these, let's say, super evolved and enhanced use of basically tools that we didn't have in the past. Social media is one example, but also other types of services that are really influencing our everyday approach to life in a way, but also shaping the society around us, the cities around us, the way in which we interact with the environment. So I just wanted to wrap this up with some transversal principles that, on top of what I've been illustrating before, I think could be kept in mind in order to help us embracing, in a way, the responsibility that we are having in these days, in the way in which we contribute to the projects that we end up working on. And one of it is that we could shift even more from thinking of experiences for people that are based on a concept of optimizing everything and efficiency in general to sustainability, which is a value that is more and more important in today's world and society, and needs to become a key point also when we think of how we innovate the experiences around us. So embed that value in all the experience journey you are trying to design. And I think this is already a step in order to give our contribution to this important cause. Also shift a bit the focus from just the person at the center of the process, which is something that design thinking has advocated a lot for, to design with a user-centered mindset, to maybe think of broader elements in the system and not just the user itself, in order to make sure that the innovative ideas that we create and shape in our work are really paying attention not just to the needs of that user today, but also to all the other people, but also non-human elements, the environment, for example, around it, other organizations, other type of populations, so that we really have a more systemic approach on the way in which we let's say, approach innovation. And very last, obviously, we need to keep fighting for the user in our everyday work, because that's the value that we bring to that conversation in design-driven innovation. But we need to do it with, I think, a more conscious view of the user that we would like to see around us in the future, and try to ask ourselves, what is this person going to do? How is this person going to evolve with the use of this technology, or of this product, of this service in the long run, both for users and communities and society? And so I think this is very important to keep in mind. So just to wrap this up, I think we can really say that these are not maybe future skill sets, but things that we feel really the pressure to integrate in our competencies today, as we are in the position to contribute to a better future, let's say, ahead of us, and we want to give our contribution to it.
Thank you so much, Roberta. That was a really great talk. Now, our audience has a few questions for you. So let's get to that. So, how would you define a sustainable workflow, and how would you quantify it?
So something that we are trying to do more and more is when we elaborate map of processes, or for example, if we take the customer journey map and this type of analysis of the journey of our users, we try to understand what are the impact in each phase, in terms of impact on obviously economic, but also on the environment, on the society, and on the organization itself, so that we try to see what value we are generating at each moment of the journey. And it doesn't need to be necessarily just economic value, but we have other layers to add to it. And I think it's really interesting to do that, because if you start considering the impact of the journey itself, you will see that there is actually a lot of value created by some of the experiences that we design that is unexpected, and but there are also maybe some potential risks. And so I think it's a way for companies to be more also aware of risks of negative impacts that some of the experiences and the products they are providing could have, and think of mitigation strategies for that. And it could be very simple example could be that introducing a tool for the automation of a workflow will save time to the people there, and maybe optimize and make the work of the organization more efficient. But at the same time, maybe it will, I don't know, reduce the possibility for people to work in the company because they will need less human power. So how do you balance that? So thinking of all these let's say relationship in between elements and interconnections, I think it's really important, and it's very simple to apply this lens when you look at something like a workflow or a customer journey.
That's great. That's great. So, another question for you is, how can we ensure the whole team, especially non designers, speak the same language and follow the same goal? What strategies can be used to avoid misunderstandings?
Mhm. I think that's thanks. It's a really good question, and I think it has a lot to do with this translating power that maybe designer as facilitators typically of innovation projects and programs could have. We don't have to all adapt to the same language, but it's really important to create that common ground to understand each other. And I think that's where that's something that could be done by having like moments of connections in which people who are not maybe busy with different aspects and elements of the product development come together and work together in specific moments to then go back to their everyday let's say job. And in my experience in all the digital transformation processes, this is very critical because they require the involvement of people from different parts of the organizations, and having these, let's say, synced sessions led probably potentially by the designers there that tackle maybe specific problems and collect all the people involved working around it for a very like focused session, and then repeat it, etc. I think this is really powerful because when people see results, tangible results of conversation being, let's say, more clear for everybody, the decision making is faster, etc., then they start to perceive the benefits of adopting a more like collaborative approach, and so they will go for it and decide to go for it in other situations.
Yeah, that's great. And one final question. As we incorporate more technologies in our products, would you say we need to shift focus from user to human?
Mhm. Yes, definitely. And some of my colleagues would say human and non-humans as well, because the world is made by a lot of different species, and we are just one of it. But yes, because the especially emerging technologies and what we see already in some products and what we have really like just a few steps ahead of us could really like impact, I think, cognitive abilities, for example, of the individuals. For example, the capability to, I don't know, remember well, like what I have to do. If I rely too much on my calendar, maybe at some point I lose it. So it's just a very obvious example. But so as this will influence the individual, how the individuals relate to each other, and the relationship in between individuals and the broader community and the environment, we have seen that not all the services that we brought to the world had the most positive effects on us and on humanity. So definitely we need to have that conversation and have clear in mind the evolution of behaviors and evolution that the world could have once specific experiences and products are going to be out there.
That's great. Thank you so much, Roberta. That was a really great talk.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Julia Chu. Julia specializes in international policies on creative cities and has worked with governments and academic institutions across Europe, North America, and the Pan Pacific Rim to implement design policies and strategy visions for the development of creative industries. She was the director of the International Design Center in Japan for 18 years and the executive director of Japan Institute of Design Promotion for 3 years. Julia is also a professor in the Visual Communication Design Department at the Musashino Art University. So join me in welcoming Julia. Over to you, Julia.
Okay. All right. I really enjoyed the two presentations, and it's a great honor for me to be part of this Women in Design initiative. My talk is going to be short. I basically is going to give a bigger vision of what is happening in Japan in terms of what Japanese government, the national policy for a future society that Japan is envisioning. And I'm also going to show what one of the biggest companies in Japan is building as a social experiment near Mount Fuji. And lastly, I'm going to show that through the pandemic, how this vision is affecting the regions, the provinces across Japan. All right, can we see the first initiative? Do we get sound? Okay. So this is a plan that Japan came up with in 2016, and it's a 15-year plan, and it's so-called the Fifth Science and Technology Basic Plan as a future society that Japan wants to go towards. And basically, it's Japan tries to define, our civilization as the hunting society, the agrarian society, industrial society, and then we had the information society. And now we are heading towards society 5.0. That's what Japan calls this plan. And basically, it's a super smart society where, the whole, industries in the country and the governmental policies is trying to create a society integrating cyberspace and physical space, and where AI will transform big data collected through IoT, Internet of Things, to make our lives more convenient. And it's sort of like turning the whole nation into a super smart society, smart nation. So next, and it's also in alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. So the goal is to reach a lot of the visions by 2030. All right, let's see. Next project is by a big company in Japan. It was launched last year and supposedly to be completed at the end of this year. Okay, let's go. Okay, so basically, this is a big social experiment, a prototype city of the future that Toyota is building. And they broke ground last year. It's designed by BIG, which is one of the largest architecture and most interesting architecture firm based in Denmark. And so the idea is Toyota is going to build this city of the future near Mount Fuji. And the idea is to be able to bring residents, researchers, inventors, and young families with children and senior citizens to all live there with an estimation of about 2,000 population. And what they would do is they would live in this city that's fully connected ecosystem powered by hydrogen fuel cells. And it's a living laboratory where technologies such as autonomy, robotics, personal mobility, smart homes, and AI can be developed and tested in a real world environment. So the timetable is by the end of the year, the first group, 30 inventors, senior citizens, and young families with children will be moving into this place. And so it's one of the interesting social experiment that's unfolding in Japan by Toyota. And so we would wait and see how it's going to affect, the other affiliated research centers and industries, and as well as the government's policy. Okay, next, I'm going under this broad picture. Okay, next one. Okay, let's look at this video first. Then I'll explain. If we can get sound, that would be great. Okay. That was about sustainable initiatives, but actually, there's the one I would like to share is this one, and it's something about regional digital transformation. How this big digital transformation initiative in Japan is affecting all the different regions. Um, um, I can talk a little bit more about that during the panel discussion. And this is addressing a problem with brain drainage because Tokyo is like the hub of the nation and where all the knowledge and all the economy is concentrated. And so with the low birth rate and the aging population, there's a big divide, gap between the big metropolis and the provincial provinces, and which echoes a lot of the situation in many countries in Asia. And so this with pandemic, this society 5.0 is actually helping a lot of the provinces. We can probably show that later when we locate the video. Okay, that's all. If you can play it, that would be great. Okay, let's go. Great, thank you. Thank you. So, I think this we global trend of big digital transformation being used as a growth strategy in all the different countries. And because Japan is very much advanced in terms of the problem it's facing, you know, the aging, declining population and aging population, etc., and the divide between the haves and have-nots. So what Japan is trying to cope with might be of references to the other countries, and I think people are all the different countries are doing very similar initiatives, just calling it different names. Like China is, of course, doing the same, and they call it Made in China 2025. And then in Asia, a lot of the countries are called their initiatives smart cities. In North America, it's industrial internet. And in Europe, as we heard from Roberta, it's industry 4.0 or smart manufacturing. So it's interesting to see what the government and the industries in Japan will unfold. But at the same time, during the next panel discussion, I would like to also point out what the Japanese young people, the students, university students, feel about what's happening in their society and how they can play a part. And I think they do have some doubts about what is happening. And because they are the future, I think we do need to involve their values. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia, for that inspiring talk. I wish we could hear the audio. Unfortunately, because of technical issues, I think the audio was somehow not playing. But we'll be sure to share these video links. You can all access them on YouTube. So we'll be sure to share them in the comment section. So you can all go look it up. So moving on to our next speaker, Garima Mehta. Garima is a consultant for digital experience with Ernst& Young and previously worked with Infosys. She is a strong advocate for digital accessibility and has created conscious awareness of accessibility practices in the digital world by conducting many webinars on this theme. Over to you, Garima.
Thank you, Bhuvna. That was a very kind introduction. Without taking much time, let me just share my screen quickly. Let me know if you can see my screen. Bhuvna, just let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Perfect. So thank you everybody for being here today on a weekend. It seems like a pretty, packed and all of that. I have, something to talk about which is very close to my heart because I've had the opportunity to work with a couple of really good clients with some Fortune companies who've been working a lot into the accessibility domain. So in short, accessibility for me is the ability to access. And when I say access, it means irrespective of who you are, where you come from, what is your education, what are your technical skills, what are your physical, mental capabilities, anything, right? So accessibility actually gives you a way to use product and services or even public spaces, anything, right? And easily without being actually hampered by what your skills are or what kind of abilities you have. So we're here talking very specifically about digital accessibility and how digital products can be actually made available to use for everybody. So there's a big myth when I say accessibility, and it's often really specifically linked to disability or permanent physical disability, which people might say in terms of somebody who has difficulty with vision or mobility, hearing, speaking, all of that. But overall, Microsoft has actually classified saying that it does not really help people only with permanent disabilities, but it also helps us in situational cases like what just happened, right? The video wasn't playing, but a couple of videos had captions on. So for situational and temporary cases, it really helps. Accessibility practices can help you in way different cases. Like somebody who just had a cataract operation, he might have difficulty seeing screens, right? Too bright screens, it would be difficult for them to read, or smaller fonts, anything. So it really helps people in different cases, not just when we talk about, again, physical capabilities, but it helps people from different age groups. It helps people from rural areas, or even somebody who has a low network or having a difficulty loading a particular video. So transcript can be used. So there are multiple ways accessibility actually helps the products to become more universal in nature, more inclusive for everybody. Uh, Moving on to actually talking about, as a user, as a designer, what do we do? So when I started my journey as a designer, I had very typical thought, I wanted to do something breakthrough. I wanted to do something more of innovation, something that really makes a difference to the world. But we just get into our day-to-day lives, day-to-day jobs, go to office, create some kind of products, come back home. So this is, I felt, where I would like to make a difference, and all of us can actually make a difference. So when we're designing products, enterprise solutions, B2B, B2C, anything, we often say we have a persona, we have a target audience. Now, when we have a persona and we target audience, we start to specify very detailed information about, who our target audience is. And when defining all of these personas, we actually we actually divide our we divide our audiences, we divide the entire world into different people, saying that this is my specific persona, and I will only focus on people who are who are fit, right? Who are normal, that we call, which would be very wrong to say, right? So this is where, as a designer, I feel that we're creating an exclusion point for all of these people who we've been talking about in the previous slide. People with some permanent, some situational, and some temporary cases. So as a designer, we are creating a divide where we see that our products are only built for a certain target audiences. So disability is also an outcome of our poorly designed products. Disability, is kind of explained in a lot of different ways and different senses. And there's some saying called, there's a social way of explaining what disability is, and there's a medical model of what disability is. So medical model often says that, if somebody has a difficulty, maybe a limb, a fractured leg, it is that person's responsibility to get it fixed. That is how medical science works. But in terms of social model says that, if there is a person who's got a fracture, products should be kind of designed, there should be a public space which allows the guy with a fracture can actually take his wheelchair easily, or take a lift, or take a travelator, something like that. So disability is an outcome of our poor design decisions. It eventually makes people feel more disabled, feel more non-inclusive. So why is it really important, and why am I here talking about it? There's a lot of tools, techniques, and UI trends, or there's a lot of techniques available online which tell you how you can do UI design accessible in nature. But for us to understand the value, empathize with the users, is most important for me, because this is when you will remember next time to make sure that you design products that are accessible in nature. First and foremost, the right to internet is, I think, there's no debate here. Internet is an important part of all of our lives. For anything that you want to do, you need internet. But when I say, as a product designer, I'm creating products that are not accessible in nature, I am saying that I use all of the food delivery apps, I use a cab booking service, I use digital payment, I use everything for my day-to-day use. But somebody who's possibly on a wheelchair, or somebody who has a vision impairment, who cannot see, he will have to either rely on friends and family, or he will have to kind of go to the public place to access a bank, or he will have to go to a restaurant to pick up food. So right to internet is very important, because internet is now not only a source of communication or entertainment, but internet is a source of everything. So we want to make sure that web is available to everybody, because that is how people will evolve. That is how people will improve over time. Or otherwise we will keep depriving people of all the services that internet provides. There are 1.3 billion people in the last census, when it was done, people with disabilities in the world. And it is not a small number. It is almost as population of China in 2014, and 4 times the population of US in 2014. Right? Big numbers. We've been always saying, if I design for people with special abilities, we're designing for very specific people. Or why should I spend my time, effort, or revenue on these people? But we're not realizing the potential it carries, the kind of difference it can make in terms of market, in terms of user, target audience, so much more. So these are some of the numbers that I've collated, and I'm sure this was like 10 years back. Now imagine the market that that must have grown here as well. So I didn't want to talk about why accessibility is a good thing to do. I want to tell you why accessibility is the right thing to do, and it is beneficial for everybody else as well. Life is unpredictable. We've all seen how COVID has actually changed the entire scenario, how COVID has actually impacted so much. These are two of the case studies that I usually like to refer, back, saying Bhopal gas tragedy that happened in India long back, like about 30 years back, and has still impacted a lot of people. Even 3 generations later, we see we see children born with cognitive disabilities, with a lot of different kind of physical impairments. Another is the Haiti earthquake, which happened about in 2010, 2012. One third of the population got injured, and there were like so many people amputated. There are videos up online which I feel are so heart touching, where you see people uh, on wheelchairs, people on crutches. They actually walk, uh, like going to the office normally. Doctors, teachers, other professionals. So these are some of the case studies. Something as simple as a car accident, or something like a black fungus that really impacted so many of us, has changed so many lives. So these are some of the reasons why I want you to know that accessibility is important. Lately, the theory of purple pound. So 1 in about 5 people in UK have a disability, which is about a lot of people, right? And UK has actually calculated that the spending power of these people, purple standing for disability, pound money, right? So these people are not just weak people. These people have a lot of spending power as well. These people are actually people who take interest in shopping as much as you or I do. So by creating inaccessible products, we're actually losing on a lot of market. We're losing on a lot of users, a lot of consumers. These are some of the really popular and powerful people that I have, kind of collated across. And you should know that these people are not just people who are weak. These are people, the target consumers that we can think about. Apart from that, all the apart from all the good things, there are a couple of laws that we must know about. So US has been very strict about discrimination against disabilities, and there are a lot of rules and regulations about why you should work on accessibility practices, especially if you're working for corporates or if you're working for companies who deliver products in the international market. It's a must to do. There have been cases against all of your favorite popular brands for not having enough of accessible content up on the website. So Domino's was sued by one of the visually challenged guy because he could not order a pizza by using his screen reader. I mean, if the platform was not accessible enough, it meant that he had to go to the restaurant and pick up his pizza, which is so unrealistic for somebody to do. So all of these brands have been sued back, and there has been an increase about 180% of lawsuits against some of large companies, and lawsuits against accessibility discrimination. India is also doing great. We have a lot of rules in places, especially for government websites. And if you go across some interesting products like for Aadhaar or for other websites, you will actually see there's a toolbar on the top which talks about accessibility, which gives you an option to increase font sizes, change color contrast, and a lot of different things. If it would possibly also ask you if you're a screen reader user, so that it becomes more compatible for you. There are a lot of things that are also done for physical places, physical spaces, as well as for transportation. And India is doing great here. And I think it's time for all of us, as a very tech friendly and very highly tech centric force, we realize that how much potential we carry in creating accessible products. Finally, I would like to end with what kind of design process that you can follow apart from just doing the UI. Understand that what kind of ADA assessment. ADA is more of, what all can you actually do in terms of accessibility. Understand what geographies that you're targeting. Understand, what is the scope of how much can you actually do in terms of accessibility. Then coming to collate, there are ways to actually generate accessibility statements analyze your existing product, what all problems can it make. When you're defining personas, you can also actually think of specific use cases, like, what if there's somebody who has difficulty with color blindness, does that really help them? Ideate and propose solutions for different use cases for some scenarios specifically, and then you can get into more of how do you fix them, reform, right? Think about how you can eventually make it better. Lastly, testing. There are a lot of information up on the internet about how you can do testing as well, because testing is very, very important. So there are ways to do auto testing, there are ways to actually do manual testing, and there should also be I think the best way to also do is connect with a couple of DEI folks, help them become a part of your product journey, and then it's an iterative process altogether. With this, I would like to close here, considering we have a time constraint. um, Over to you. Bhuna, I think you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry about that. Thank you so much, Garima. That was a great talk. So, we have one question for you from the audience. And the question, I'm going to read the question out. India has guidelines for the Right of Persons with Disabilities Act. The World Wide Web Consortium has the WCAG guidelines. How can we ensure this kind of information gets incorporated into design education? Should there be a mandatory standard for all digital products in organizations too?
I love this question, Supriya. I think there are a lot of standards, but my only, there are two things that I feel are lacking. One is awareness and acknowledgement, right? So even if you're aware that something like accessibility exists in this world, uh, you should have the intent and you should have the acknowledgement that there might be users who might require extra help, or we need to create a product for these kinds of people. So I remember when I was studying, we used to, like every other design college, we used to create products similar in nature, that do some kind of innovation practices, do some kind of product designing for people, like a very generic one, right? But when it really came to designing for people with disabilities, we used to have a separate subject. And I think it's time all of us understand we don't need a separate topic, or we don't need a separate subject for it. It should be a part of all of our products. And I think that is where acknowledgement is very important. Apart from that, I think the government does have a couple of guidelines for public portals, but we're yet to come across, in Indian space, we're yet to work around in private companies, or for private products, especially for startup culture. If they're doing so much into new products, I think it's time we realize that even private organizations should focus on accessibility.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Garima. That was so great. Our last speaker for today is Supriya Kulkarni. Supriya is the founder of two organizations: the Ethics Company, which aims to guide businesses to make informed decisions while developing products, and the Pink Tea Company, a brand consultancy. So, over to you, Supriya.
A big thank you to UMO Design for inviting me to speak today, and a big thank you to all of you for attending this session. I'm sure you've been following all the talks so far, and you would have seen some wonderful women in design, heard their stories, their successes, learnings from them. So I myself have actually attended some amazing talks, and got some valuable and enriching insights about improving the overall design skill sets, enhancing design knowledge, and adding to the overall design practice. So today in my session, I feel like I can sort of rest easy and take the liberty and the opportunity to actually not talk about design. So I'm not going to be talking about design. In fact, I'm going to be a bit provocative and tell you how not to be a designer. or rather, how not to be just a designer. And that's the title of my talk for today. So, why am I saying that we should not be just designers? We tend to define ourselves, by what we study, our degrees, our education, or our professional roles. We're often defined by the disciplines that we work in. We say we are UX designers, or graphic designers, or communication designers. Many of us also try to fit ourselves into, like a job description that may be provided by our employers or the industries that we work in. And really, there's nothing particularly wrong in that, as long as it is not limiting to our immense potential as professionals. So, my session today is about not looking at ourselves only through the aspect of our education or the professional roles that we play every day, but going deeper and examining the perception, the narrative that we have about ourselves as designers. So, let me begin the session by illustrating this thought by taking my own example, the example of my professional journey. So, I'm calling it the story of multiple hats because I think that's what I've been doing, wearing multiple interesting hats in my long career. And I'll try to keep the story very short and simple. So, like a lot of you, I have a creative background. I studied applied art and I started my career in advertising more than 25 years back. I worked with Gray and with Low. Actually, it was so long ago that both these agencies had different names at the time. After a few years, I found advertising to be a bit limiting, so I changed track and moved into branding and strategic design. I was lucky to work with interesting clients, famous brands, as well as well known design professionals of the time. So, one of the people I worked with was Preeti Vyas, who is an icon in the country and the design industry, and who I learned a lot from. I was also fortunate to have started the strategic design arm for Umbrella Design, which I believe is also among well known design agencies in the country. I guess I had a lot of ambition and also a need to sort of push my capabilities. So I set up my own brand consultancy, Pink Tea Company, with a small and select set of clients. So running this brand consultancy was my most challenging period as a creative person, mainly because, art education does not necessarily teach us how to become good entrepreneurs. So it was all about making mistakes, learning on the job. As a creative person, it was also quite difficult for me to know how to manage other people, whether it was employees, collaborators, clients, managing finances, growing and sustaining the business, also at the same time producing great work. So I learned firsthand that entrepreneurship can be extremely scary, challenging, and stressful, but a fantastic learning experience. Also, as if, doing this in one country was not scary enough, I set up Pink Tea Company in Indonesia as well when I moved there. So this was again a different type of learning for me. Dealing with new people, with new culture, different mindsets, learning a new language, establishing credibility all over again, proving myself again in a different geography. So it was both exciting and challenging at the same time. The advantage again for me was that I got a new perspective, not just about the work that I was doing, but also about myself. Indonesia was and is, quite digital. So there was a lot of new stuff that I had to learn, many new skills that I had to learn, topics that I had to study from scratch because I was doing so many projects in unfamiliar categories. I realized that so many technologies were coming in, there were new ways of doing things. And I wanted to be able not just to manage, the present, but sort of be ready for the future of what might come. So I enrolled for my master's in digital management in Hyper Island, Singapore. And in fact, I received my master's degree exactly 29 years after doing my bachelor's in applied art from India. So, my post graduation course in digital management and the topics of study not only opened up my mental world, so to speak, but also empowered me to enter into a new area of interest, which is ethical or responsible design, especially relating to technology and digital products. And since then, I've been able to do really interesting work in this field. I've been doing ethics consulting, I've been talking at different forums, I've been teaching about ethical design at institutes in different categories and industries. And there's so much more that I look forward to doing in the area of ethical design. That was, in short, the story of my work journey. And like all long journeys, they end up teaching us many, many lessons. I know I've been fortunate that good opportunities came my way, and I was also lucky to get the support and guidance of people when I needed it. But if I have made it seem that everything was easy, effortless, hunky dory, that's really not true. There were many times, there were many moments of deep emotional and mental struggle. There were times when I felt really overwhelmed and alone and incapable. Many times I was ready to give up on my dream. And actually, these are the moments I realize that teach you the best of lessons. And today, what I'd like to do is share some of these lessons and the learnings with you. The first learning that I want to share is something that we keep hearing all the time. Uh, we hear this phrase so often: think out of the box. So today I'm going to urge you not to think outside of the box, but to actually go ahead and rethink the idea of the box. I would say question the idea that a box exists, make your own rules, and break them. The second learning for me is moving beyond your core expertise. How do you do that? By stepping out of your comfort zone and adopting a beginning or a beginner mindset. So, actively and proactively try and explore new topics, whether it's new technologies, new interfaces, unfamiliar territory. Try to work in or research an industry about which you know nothing or where you do not know anyone. This will help you look at your own work differently and bring in a fresh perspective and a new way to approach problems or situations in your work. Do not read only about design. I'm often asked what design books I read or who my role models in the design industry are. So while I do admire many people and do read about design, my strongest inspiration actually comes from other topics. And it's true that our strongest insights also comes from outside of our core topic. So I would advise you to absorb inspiration from multiple places. Don't let design be the only thing that interests you. Be as diverse as possible when it comes to taking in information, whether it is in the form of, you might be reading books or blogs or listening to podcasts or, however you sort of take in that information. You may read the news, read about different technologies, about businesses, about society. It's a great idea to actually, study where people are investing their money and time. And you will realize that everything is interconnected. And as creative people, it's so important to have a holistic and wide view of the world that we create for. The next learning is to look deep into yourself. I believe that our biggest strength is actually inside us, but our biggest limitation is our own view of ourselves. So constantly keep examining who you are. What do you identify with? What are your values? What brings out the best in you? What moves you and what drives you? And how does all of this reflect in what you create? And how does it add to what you create? This takes me to the next learning, which is choose what impact you want to create in the world. As creative people, our unique talents, our ability to zoom in and out, to visualize systemic scenarios, and consider multiple aspects is a definite advantage. So, how do you use this power for yourself and for others? How do you use your abilities in the external world that you want to create? How do you want to influence others and impact the world? Do you want to create a ripple, a wave, or actually take the world by storm? I often talk about responsible design and how creators should be intentional about what they make and how they make it, as well as be cognizant or aware of the consequences of their creations. So I would say now be equally aware of how every project you take up or every design experience impacts you as a creator, because what we design also designs us. The next learning is a very important one. Make friends with fear and insecurity. These are going to be with your companions for life. So try and understand what really scares you and limits you. What keeps you from your potential? Every time that you feel scared or insecure, you'll realize that you actually end up working harder, or you learn more about that topic so that you're not caught on the wrong foot. So make fear and insecurity your best friends. I would say hold hands with them and walk with them, and they will make sure that you take the necessary effort to do good. So, whatever scares you can actually make you strong. The next learning is that age and time are not barriers. I say this with full conviction and from first hand personal experience. I got my master's degree at the age of 49. Inventing and reinventing newer and fresher versions of ourselves is absolutely necessary. There's so much to learn and do all the time. I feel one life is not enough for everything. And we're so busy most times just getting through our work day and our projects that we miss out on so many things that interest us. So do not be afraid to try whatever you missed out on at any point in your career. Any time is actually the right time. And in a sense, the pandemic has also underlined this realization. The last learning: reflect, evolve, and reinvent yourself. So, the real indicators of success for me should not be about how you compare with other people, but how do you compare against yesterday's version of yourself. So, I would say be a sponge and absorb from every source. It will make you that much better at whatever you take up. Do a personal audit or a retrospective after every project, after every new experience, after working with your clients, your collaborators, your peers. Keep something like a reflection journal, and you will realize that understanding what worked for you and what did not work for you will really help you with your personal progress. So these are, some points that I want to leave behind. While I may have come across as trying to be a life coach or a new age guru, the truth is learning new software or developing a hard skill or dabbling in new disciplines will take you far. But understanding yourself, your limitations, your insecurities and fears, your strengths, and your power, treating yourself as a constant work in progress, and exploring different versions of yourself outside of your core design persona will empower you to create a much more varied and interesting body of work throughout your life. So that was my story and learnings from my work journey. I do want to say that although the deck seems simple, this was one of the most difficult presentations for me to put together. It's so easy to talk eloquently and at great length on specific topics of design, but it was very challenging for me to put my learnings in the form of insights. I sincerely hope at least some aspects will have inspired you. If you'd like to know more or discuss more, please feel free to connect with me at these places. Thank you very much for attending this session and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Supriya, for that thought provoking talk. It's now time for our panel discussion. You have already heard our panelists, Riddhi, Roberta, Julia, Garima, and Supriya. The theme for our conversation today is the future of design. This conversation will be moderated by Kanika Kohli. Kanika is a user research lead with McKinsey and Company. So let's welcome our panelists and moderators.
Thank you so much, Bhuvana, for this wonderful introduction. And in interest of time, I'll quickly introduce the topic for today's discussion and start with the discussion. So today, in the next 20-25 minutes, what we are going to talk about is future. Yeah, a word that triggers a sense of curiosity, makes us feel anxious, and brings a certain amount of uncertainty with it, right? So let's see how the future picture looks like for a design community. And when I say future, I mean both the short term future, like 3 to 5 years from now, as well as the long term future, say 10 years from now as well, right? So stay tuned with us and see how this picture turns out by the end of the discussion. All right. So Priya, I want to start the discussion with you. So the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of the word future is technology. It's changing, it's evolving at a rate that is faster than ever. And so there's one part of it where it's making the human lives easier than ever. But there's another aspect of it that it's not creating an impact that is, in some sense, a negative impact, right? So there are apps that are making people addicted. There's this infinite scroll. It's affecting our mental health. Then there have been data privacy has been a concern lately from a lot of countries. There have been a lot of data biases because of the AI and a lot of other data-driven technologies. So how do you see these things evolving in the future, and what would be some of the best things, best practices as designers that we should keep in our mind so that we can reduce the negative impacts going forward?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kanika. So you're very right in the sense that technology changes everything. Technology changes the way we behave, the way we conduct our daily life. Technology has also sort of changed and altered the meaning of common terms. Now I'm picking more on when you spoke of negative impacts and privacy, for instance. We understand as users, as lay people, we understand privacy, the word, when it comes to physical privacy. Even our laws recognize the right to physical privacy. But the idea of digital privacy is still very new and not completely understood. So if somebody were actually to peep in through our window, we would say that my privacy is getting violated. But there are apps and devices that are sort of listening into us constantly, gathering different kinds of data about us, but we sort of accept that really, without really questioning. So I would say that this kind of awareness has to be there from all stakeholders. Now, whether that is the manufacturer, the creator, the business owner, regulatory authorities, of course, but even users need to be aware of how they're using their technologies, what kind of technology they're using, whether it's your smartphone, whether it's your smart speaker. So I would say, as a user, be very, very cognizant, be very aware of what you're using, how you're using it, what kind of information you're giving out. Again, for the design community, very, very important that we understand and take our role with a lot of responsibility and accountability for what we are creating and putting out in the world, because many times we don't understand that most of these technologies have certain kind of ethical issues and a lot of negative impacts on users as well as non-users. So I would say that these things are very, very important.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And just adding to what Supriya said, so there have been a lot of ways, maybe it's yet to be an unexplored territory, but there have been things like differential privacy. There have been things like where you're removing the biases when training the machine for the machine learning models, right? So yeah, hopefully the future will take care of this as we move forward, right? All right. So I now want to move from the technology to the tools that we use as designers. And I think, Roberta, you would be a good person to answer this. So there have been a lot of tools that we see nowadays, like the no-code tools. There have been tools that are helping as creative assistants in the design community, right? Easing the manual efforts that we designers used to put in our work. But there's one aspect of design process which is still where we still feel the human interaction is the key differentiator, and that is the user research part. Definitely the pandemic did kind of tweaked it, and we were doing remote research sessions, but it's still the human interaction that is a key differentiator till now when it comes to the user research. How do you see the tools evolving, particularly for a user researcher going forward in the future?
Thanks for the question. And it's true that the pandemic has accelerated a bit the practice in terms of adapting it and evolving it due to the constraints that we had to face. Because on one side, it has become more difficult to observe people in the context of their life. We couldn't go into people's houses. We still don't go, or very rarely, and mostly meet them in a neutral environment. And the type of insights that you can collect around people's behavior just by talking versus like spending time with them in the context in which they do things is really different. But we can, let's say, fill this gap. On one side, we have been using a lot more, let's say, self documentation technique, like digital diaries, or things in which people had to observe their behavior before interacting with us and sharing with us photos, videos, all sort of things that they were doing, so that we could still see a bit of it. And I think that's very important, because makes the research a process for the people who participate as well. And then on the other side, we have been using a lot more online traces left by users, by providing comments, talking on the social networks, posting their photos, their idea, their thoughts. And that's an incredible source of data on human behavior. And it's all spontaneously generated by people. So what we typically do there is try to analyze it in a way that is almost quantitative, through semantic analysis and other types of techniques. And that accelerates a lot our way of developing knowledge around a certain topic. Obviously, you always need to shift from the macro to the micro level of the specific comment or photo at some point. So it fluctuates amongst quantity and quality and qualitative techniques. But I think it's a very important thing to do also in the user research, to maybe leverage some automation in order to maybe reach out to more people, or embrace quantity more, and then let's say interpret it qualitatively. So we have been doing this more, and I think it's a big part of what is going to happen in the future as well.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And I think, yeah, just to add to that, so when we are talking about, say, technology helping us build these great tools for the design community, definitely there's some great work going on when it comes to emotional AI, helping us build those sentimental analysis, heat maps, all those things. So definitely, it's still going to be a human-driven thing, but yeah, enabled by technology to a large extent going forward. That's how I see it. Right. Okay. So I now actually have a question for you, Julia. You have been doing some great work when it comes to putting the design policies, working with some academic institutions and some governments. So, and then there are two sides of design that how I see it. One is the design education part of it, and the other is the professional industry work that we as designers are doing. And there have been a lot of buzz around the professional community, but still we feel that the design education part is somewhat lagging behind as the technology is emerging and progressing. And particularly, say, for a country like India, the developing nation, what would be some of the best practices that you suggest, that at least we should start talking about and start working on at the ground level, uh, when it comes to the design education? And it's high time that we start thinking about evolving that pillar of design, the design education.
I think with this new, digital transformation, design education in terms of Japan, we are still very much lagging behind, because a lot of our design schools do not have the faculty who are able to teach students to be UX designers or interface or interaction design. And most of these curriculum is only carried out by schools, universities with engineering capacities or computer science capacities. So design schools is very much lagging behind. And what's happening is 85% of our graduates are put into UX design departments or digital marketing in terms of communication design graduates, but they don't have the training. So what happened is the companies are doing the training. This is the situation in Japan. So I'm really not so the government is actually trying to come up with subsidies to try to catch up and try to bring in foreign experts who are able to bridge this gap. So I think probably in India you're much more advanced than us in Japan in terms of teaching design students to be able to adapt to the industrial needs.
Okay, that's interesting to know. Roberta, maybe you want to chime in here, since you also have experience working with academic institutions. Would love to know your thoughts around the topic.
Yeah, I think it's. I appreciated a lot also the talks today, because in this sense, I think I see that there is a certain maturity in a way of the way in which we teach design in various levels, because it's not just about university. There are also a lot of upskilling courses that people could take in order to embed in these days design skills and competencies in what they do, no matter the background they have. So I think there is a good maturity in that sense, but we are also in a crucial moments in which we need to start considering elements that were not considered before. And I think this is a big opportunity for not design schools, but in general, like institutions that work in the field of innovation to include more like interdisciplinarity in what they are providing and teaching at the moment. And I have in mind specifically the aspect of inclusion and accessibility that were mentioned during one of the talk. Still very rare to embed it since the beginning because maybe we lack also the competencies to do it. I'm thinking of environmental issues and sustainability in general. I'm thinking of behavioral science. All these things for me, it will be interesting to make them all come together inside the curricula.
Definitely, yeah. And some of it, like you touched upon in your presentation as well, the future skill set, right? That could also be something as a baseline to start building and thinking the curriculum that, okay, behavioral designers could be another future skill set that, courses can be structured around, and future tool set, future skill set, and how we can use the design to bring more on the social change in the society, and thinking of how it's impacting the environment, how it's impacting the mental health and sustainability. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good idea. I think that's a good point to start with. At least we can start the conversation around this with the government and the authorities.
So there's, sorry, Kanika, there's one thing I would like to add to this where design education is concerned, which is that, very often we emphasize on design aesthetics and design efficiency. I think the word that I would the word that resonates most with me when it comes to design is the impact that design can cause, and positive impact on not just users, but non-users and society as a whole. So if we can sort of, keep that at the back of our minds, whatever the curriculum might be, the impact that every design, not just artifact, but every designer is causing around the world. I think that should definitely be something that we consider.
I just love the way you put it. Yeah, impact gives a fresh perspective. Let's use impact to bring a fresh perspective when we are rethinking design education. That would be a good start.
And I think students need to be motivated. We need to give them examples from around the world, because there are so many very, very impactful projects happening all over the world by designers collaborating with people from other disciplines. And students need to be exposed to that so that they can sort of make a decision as to, this is where I want to go, this is what I see as a good path for using technology. So if they're exposed to all these different options, I think it's very important that they can be motivated. And also they need, with the pandemic and remote teaching, they're really, really missing in terms of the in-person experiences and field work. I think I see a lot of the students turning, averted to all this digital world that we're heading towards. They're becoming more and more, they're trying to create something that's handmade, something that's more analog in all their digital work. I think it's a revolt against what's happening in our civilization at this moment.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing this with us. All right. So before we move to the next, I just request Julia to, if you can just mute yourself, otherwise there's an echo sound coming. Yeah. So before we move to the next set of questions, just a quick reminder to the audience: keep posting your questions in the chat box so that we can take up the questions for our panelists in the end. All right. So I now want to move to the back to the professional side of it. That okay, we are talking about that. Okay, design has emerged a lot, technology is changing, and so are the companies, the organizations. So Riddhi, I want to talk about like how do you see companies being more mature on the UX front, the UX maturity level of a lot of companies, especially in the startup space. I see that companies are getting more mature from the UX front. Earlier, the scenario was that okay, we as designers were always in a position that we have to evangelize the design and constantly have this need to prove that to the stakeholders that okay, you need to think from the user perspective, bring the human centric element
Right.
to the product. But do you see that changing and how it this trend evolving in the future as well?
Definitely, definitely. I can tell you from my own experience that 5 years back, wherever I was working, I was put in one team. I was on the side. I was kept in different teams, and it was on and on. And then suddenly, I think some boom in the industry, uh, and it was the center stage was design for everything. If I bet that if you open 10 companies on LinkedIn right now and you look at the jobs, each one of them is going to have one or two minimum openings in design, senior designer, junior designer, because the whole focus is shifting towards design. They know now that design is not just aesthetics, it's something that you invest in. If we invest in a good design right now, it's going to help us bear fruits going forward. And it's wonderful to see how that thinking is being taken up by people, and now people want to become designers. Whereas I remember when I took up, I'm pretty junior to the crowd that we are in right now, but then even then, more than 10 years back, when I took up industrial design, people kept asking me, what is it, what do you do? And then when I say I'm in the design field, they would straight off associate with it fashion design or anything else, or interior design, because that's what people knew. And now the craze is about product design, UI UX. People from the development field want to shift in. People from all aspects want to move into the whole design world. So I think that is where I would say that in the last 5-10 years, the whole UX maturity has shifted. All the organizations are going more user driven, which is the last stage of a UX maturity model. If I were to talk about the Nielsen model of 6 stages of UX maturity, it starts from UX being absent to UX being integrated and then user driven. So I guess we are already at that stage in India, wherein the whole boom has happened and people understand the importance of design in a product.
Yes, absolutely agree. Couldn't agree more than that. Yeah, I also had a similar experience, and when I think the level of awareness is still something that I mean we are still not there, but yeah, it's on the rising side.
Right.
Yeah, hopefully we'll.
It's I think,
Hmm.
to sum it up, I can just say that from when you tell me what do you do, oh
Hmm.
you are a designer. And now when you are a designer, what do you do? So that is a shift that we can see now in the minds of the people who are not like belonging straight to the design field. So they also
Yeah.
understand the importance now.
And even the job descriptions, if you see the job descriptions that are there on these websites today, and they were say even 2 3 years back also, you could easily feel the difference that okay, there has been some level of awareness and maturity that is kind of
Definitely,
shaping those job descriptions.
definitely, definitely.
Definitely. Okay. So, in interest of time, I think I can just take one more question, and after that, we can open it for the audience to ask the questions. So, I just want to gather around all of your thoughts around the topic that okay, with so much emerging technologies, like there's AR, VR, metaverse, a lot of stuff is going on, right? So how do you see the role of design and designers changing in the digital product design space? And if you can suggest some best practices that can help us as designers, and especially a lot of budding designers in the audience, that what would be the best ways to keep us updated with these ever emerging technologies?
So probably I can just add a little bit to that or introduce the thought of, for me, design is a designer is not necessarily the person who has design education. I would say that, with the amount of technology and the kind of technologies that are being incorporated into all the products, every person who is making a decision regarding the products that we are creating is, to me, a designer. So everyone, whether your designation may be a writer, you might be a technologist, you might be a developer, but you're still a designer because you're creating or you're designing an experience, right? So for me, the definition of designer, I feel, has shifted because we are dealing with so many different levels of decision making, and every person who's sort of involved in that process needs to recognize that. I mean, even a business decision that you take is also a design decision. Yeah. So if I were to just talk about two things that every person who makes a decision needs to keep in mind, I would say one, be very cognizant of the impact that your products are creating. Just do a little bit of future thinking of how your products are going to impact users, non-users, society, whatever it might be. And two, be very intentional about what are the outcomes that you want. Yeah. So for me, those are the two important things. It doesn't matter, what disciplines you might be working in or what kind of products you might be creating.
Or what technology you're going to incorporate in that product?
Absolutely, because there are multiple technologies. I mean, if you spoke about the metaverse is actually going to be something that is a first time for a lot of people. Many people don't even understand what the metaverse involves. Creating experiences for the metaverse. We're going to talk. We're going to actually have AR, VR, and so many different things. We might be having voice assistants. We might be having things that people have never even dabbled in. Traditional designers, so to speak. So it's going to be new for everyone. So I feel when you work backwards from the outcomes and the impacts that you want to create, that's a good way to actually begin designing all these experiences and taking those decisions.
Right. That's a great perspective. Riddhi, you want to share your thoughts on this? Yeah, sure.
Definitely. I think there's one way to go about it is to keep up and to understand one thing that say right now we're talking about, I spoke about being data driven. It's a skill that still all the people in the design industry may or may not have acquired. But then I also am keeping the fact in mind that tomorrow, say after 4 years, 5 years, every designer is going to be data driven. So it's going to be like a very normal thing. It's not something that I'm going to talk about. Like earlier, we used to talk about user experience design. Now, user experience design is normalized. Similarly, data driven designing is going to be normalized. Something new is going to come in. And it's important that we keep up with that, because as and when we designers go up the ladder, up the work that we are doing, we start getting into management roles. We have a lot more responsibilities rather than to just design, and things keep changing. And when the new designers come into the field, they're pretty enthusiastic. They'll keep going on to platforms, they'll go to dribble, they'll go to a lot of other things that we are not even aware of, and they'll gather knowledge from there. But then I think we also will have to put a conscious effort in understanding these technologies, and then making sure that we know what is needed to deliver for them, and then know that this is also going to expire and something new is going to come up. So it's like a very open mindset that we'll have to keep when we go on the design journey.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I totally agree. So before technology becomes irrelevant and it's replaced by something else, you should
Right.
at least as a designer know the capabilities of what it's able to do, and also the limitations. Okay, what are the limitations of this particular new technology? So that when you're thinking from a system design perspective, you know what to leverage and what to
Right.
limit.
Right. Like
Mm-hmm.
one example that I can quote is that earlier we used to have typists or computer operators in companies, because it was a skill that was acquired by a few people. And then over the years, when everybody started operating computers, we don't have that role anymore. It's acquired by everybody. Similarly, same goes for, say, data science, same goes for data driven design. All these are, some things that these are skills that people are going to pick up as and when we move towards digitally designing interfaces, and putting, not having offline stores, only having online stores. So that's something to keep in mind.
Right. Roberta, you want to share something around those lines as well?
Yeah, I think I've been already discussing it quite a lot today. But what I could add is that sometimes, I mean, obviously, there is always a lot of enthusiasm, also in the way in which we look ahead of us. I think it's part of human nature in a way. And whenever we hear of a new project coming up, etc., there is like pure curiosity and the willingness to do things. Uh, and to have an impact in a certain way. So I think we that should stay the same. We don't need to. I think approach our work with like anything negative in a way. It's more a matter of making sure that we develop our awareness of what could be short-term, long-term consequences, and include it into the conversation in a positive way, with like the possibility to maybe drive thinking also around us that consider those potential risks or consequences. So that's why also with our initiative of servicedesignTools.org, which is a collection of tools to design services that was put together when I was doing research for my university, Politecnico of Milan, and that we still run with the support of students from the master courses of the university. I think what we are trying to do there is to enhance the collection of methods and tools that we use in order to include elements of related to what we are talking about. So potential impact of new technologies, how like the new experiences are going to maybe change the way in which we behave and the world around us, etc. Try to include it in what we currently do, so that it's not just something that we talk about, but it's something that we really put on the table while we are working on projects. It may be that there is nothing to discuss or just a little. It may be that it open up a long conversation. So in very simple ways, instead of maybe doing like user profiles and personas in the way in which we do it, I've always been doing it, we always include an element of dynamic personas, so that we look at what that behavior and that user is going to be in, like, I don't know, a few years from now, if they use the product and service we design. It's very simple. It's just a small extra exercise, but at least it gives the opportunity to have that conversation. So I think that's what it's important. It's important to keep in mind that nobody is going to come to our desk and ask, hey, are you considering the consequences of including this type of technology in your project, etc. It's more up to us and to the framework, the mental models that we use in our work.
Right. And like to your point, so technology can only enable us to add that behavioral element in our existing personas. So it's kind of playing the role of an enabler in our design process, right? So yeah, that's the way of going forward. Any last thoughts, Julia, that you want to share before we open it for the questions from the audience?
Because I think we're going through the same phase in the development of human civilization. So, in terms of these emerging technologies, they're just tools, and tools looking for problems. They are solutions looking for problems. So, we're not really, trying to find the right solutions to problems. We're actually trying to find the right problems to solve.
That's absolutely, yeah, wonderful, and it's the right thought to end this discussion, that okay, we have to think of finding the right problems rather than thinking of the solutions to the problems, right? Thank you so much. Wonderful to have this discussion, and thank you to all our women leaders joining us from different parts of the world, and all the people in the audience who joined us on this Saturday evening. So over to you, Bhuvna. If you have any questions from the audience, we can take them up.
We don't have any questions from the audience yet. So, yeah, I think we should go ahead and wrap up this session.